All right, habit 6, managing your time, because we all know if you don't manage it, it's going to manage you. Now, the other thing is if you work at a law firm, managing your time is even more important because it's also about meeting your billable hour goal. But I'm not just talking about billable hours here, because your time is valuable as well, regardless of where you work or what practice area you work in. As a paralegal, you work under strict deadlines that are decided by court, the court order, regulations, rules. Have you ever been to a dinner party talking to friends who work in other areas like marketing or sales or advertising? They don't know what it's like to work in a law firm and have a deadline. They don't have deadlines that are set by court rules that could get the client in major trouble if those deadlines aren't met. They have maybe a marketing report that's due to their boss the next day. They're not going to get fired if the boss gets it at 10 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock. So they just don't have the same level of stress as a paralegal does. Here's why it's important and why you should be managing your time. Let's look at, regardless of whether it's a 1,600 billable hour goal, or if you work in-house, you've got maybe 1,600 hours worth of work that you've got to get done in a year. If you're working at 90% productivity, that's going to take you 1,780 hours. Now, this 90% productivity, what that is, 90% of the time that you're in the office, you're working on a client file or a case file, whether it's billable or not. If you've got another person sitting down the hall who has that same 1,600 hours worth of work, and they're working at 75% productivity, it's going to take them 2,135 hours to get that same work done. That means they're working on the weekend or they're working late. They're giving up their family time. They're giving them 355 hours. So I'm talking about having a better work-life balance, which then makes you a happier employee as well. Studies show that a well-rested, balanced person is way more productive than someone who spent 10 hours in the office and went home and collapsed in bed for 5 hours and then was back in the office doing it again. So one of the things that you can do is to start tracking your productivity. Just like we use Fitbits to track our exercise and food journals to log, when you're logging it, when you're tracking something, every study will tell you you're more likely to improve. You might not even notice how much you're improving or how much time you were spending doing something that you didn't need to be doing. Just this one thing alone, tracking your productivity and saying, okay, well, let's call it our billable hours are divided into the hours that we worked to figure out the productivity. And this would be an exercise. This is what it would look like. You can do it on your smartphones. You can do it, while I'm talking here. So the hours worked, let's use yesterday as an example. So you probably have it still fresh in your mind, how many hours you worked yesterday. And then the hours that you quote billed. And I put that in parentheses because if you're in-house, it would be how many hours of that time that you worked did you actually work on case files or client files, legal matters. If you left work yesterday a couple hours early to go to a doctor's appointment or something, and you worked 6 hours, but you were paid for 8 because you used 2 hours PTO, you don't include that. It's 6 hours goes on line 1. A question that I get asked a lot is, well, what is a good number? Well, think about it like this. You can't be at 100% because you have to get up and go to the bathroom. You are probably going in the kitchen to grab some more coffee or water. You might take a quick lap around the office hallway, to boost your energy level. 90% is a really good number. 80% is still a pretty good number. Once you get below 75%, when you look back, if you look at these numbers here, this was just a 15% difference between 75 and 90. Any 15% increase is going to get you 300 or 400 hours. Even if you look at yesterday and you were at 65%, if you could go from 65 to 80%, you'd still be gaining about 300 hours in a year. So keep that in mind. Doesn't matter where you're at, just give yourself a starting point to know this is what the number is yesterday, and then set a goal. You could use this You know, if you wanted to set a goal and say, okay, well, tomorrow I want to be at between 85 and 90%. What does that mean? And then just draw the line down and say, okay, well, if I work 8 hours tomorrow and I want to be at 85 to 90% productivity, I got to bill about 7 hours of those 8 hours tomorrow. So you could use this little cheat sheet to set goals. I have some people who just literally make copies of these, the small ones, like what's in your handout, and then cut them out and just put the dates on them so that you can look back and see each day, you know, here's my goal for tomorrow. Did I meet it? Did I exceed it? So one thing that you can do to help with your time management is to stop multitasking, because we all know multitasking is task switching. It's not multitasking. What's interesting is there are some studies out there that show that multitasking can reduce your productivity by as much as 40%. Now imagine if some of the, maybe that's off, right? Because some of the studies exaggerate. You could say that can't be possible, 40%. Let's say that they're half off and it's a 20% reduction. Just stopping multitasking alone would give you a huge gain. Could you imagine a 20% gain in productivity just from not multitasking anymore? Another one is distractions. So which one of these is your biggest office distraction? Career Builder study came out and said that office gossip reduces office productivity by somewhere around like 20–25%. Coworkers stopping by, it's another one. Or maybe even office noise, could be all of the above. So one method that you can use to try to limit your distractions and keep you on track is called the Ivy Lee method. Especially if you're a visual kind of person, this works and you like working off of, you know, to-do lists and checklists. So this method says you list out 6 things that you want to accomplish when you first get in the morning. These 6 things in the order of importance. And you don't work on anything else, obviously, unless another emergency comes in, which that never happens, but until you check off these things on your list and you just work down the list. And so let's say these 3 things get done today and it's the end of the day, 4, 5, and 6 get bumped to tomorrow's list. But they don't necessarily automatically become 1, 2, and 3 because we know other things come in and those things might be even more important tomorrow than these 3 things were today. Another method that you can use, and this actually comes from Stephen Covey, he says that we spend way more time than we think in the bottom right quadrant. Those are things that are not urgent and not important. And they're things that we should either be delegating, automating, or declining. So I thought it was interesting if you were to take the important and not important and change it to billable, not billable, or productive, not productive, if you don't have a billable hour goal. So if you're more the visual person instead of a to-do list kind of person, what you could do is at the end of the day or the beginning of the next day, sit down and draw these 4 quadrants and list in the upper left corner the urgent productive things that have to get done, and don't move into the next box over, the not urgent but still productive. You don't move over into that box until you've finished with the others. And then in terms of the not productive, the things down below, make a list of those things that, you know, once you start tracking your productivity and you see where some of that time is disappearing to, put those in this bottom quadrant. Things that you could delegate or things that you should be declining, things that might be urgent but not productive. What is it that I can do? And I'm not going to start doing those things until I've got the upper quadrants done. Another thing that helps is called the Pomodoro Technique. You wouldn't need to do all these. I'm giving you a bunch of different techniques that you can use if time management is one of your issues. This is an actual Pomodoro tomato. It's a real technique. It's the old-fashioned timer, like the kitchen timers that we used to have. Now, their technique says you start with 25-minute increments. I changed it to 24 because that's a 0.4. Now, you would do this with your phone timer or a stopwatch app on your computer. Set it for 24 minutes, work uninterrupted for that time, If you get interrupted or you check an email or something like that, you try to, you get distracted, then you start all over. But if you work uninterrupted, when the timer goes off, you put a check mark on your calendar, or maybe you keep a running tab on a piece of notebook paper or something. You take a 3-minute break. Now that 3-minute break could be walking to the break room to get a drink, or it could be returning that phone call that came in when you had it on Do Not Disturb, when you were doing your 24-minute time increment. And then you start over. When you've got 4 check marks, then you take a 12-minute break. I know this sounds a little silly, but it works. It really does work because you see the reward of more and more check marks and more work getting done.